Reptiles have a third eyelid that helps them see underwater. To depict that, do it lightly. Let's put a curve right here. Just like when we drew the human eye, our reflection is going to halfway go over the diamond pupil and halfway come out on this side as well. I'm not going to do a perfect circle. I'm going to do kind of a blob shape, because doing a perfect circle is going to make it look like a cartoon. I'm also going to do a smaller cast-off reflection. Do it lightly, I'm only doing it heavy. Do another smaller kind of blob shape right there as well. If we remember, all reflections are perfectly cleaned out. We need to erase where the diamond went inside the reflection so that it's pure white. When it comes to these outer scales, I want you to think of creating a racetrack that kind of goes off the page and back on the page. In the bottom left corner, skip some space and try to mimic this curve right here. So I'm skipping some space and I'm thinking of this curve right here. This works with our racetrack. If I have like a little racetrack going, it's going to fit in those curves. Well, racetrack up here needs to go along with this curve. If you copy this line here and paste it right here, that's what we're going for. It might take a couple of tries. Try to copy that shape there. Let's test our racetrack. Going around and right here. Yes, it goes off the page. It goes around. Now we're going to get to here. In our bottom right corner, we need to match this curve. However much space you skipped for here, it's the same amount of space you're going to skip over here. We want to match this curve. Test it with our racetrack. So think of it like a racetrack where the curves have to match the curves of the eye. When drawing in scales, I want you to think of the lines that we've made, the curves that we made, as guidelines. And we're going to create rounded rectangles out of these guidelines. Like there's my first rounded rectangle. There's my next rounded rectangle. I've only skipped a little bit of space in between my rectangles. Here's my next rounded rectangle. Well, here's the thing. It hardly stays straight like that with our guidelines. Our guidelines mostly do this. And so our rounded rectangles, you might have to turn your page so that you can very easily see where they go to start forming your rounded rectangles. The shapes that I'm using on the left side, It's like a bracket on the right side, another bracket. And then I let the original shelf of space that we built fill in the middle. And then afterward, what you do is you erase the in-betweens so that the scales pop forward in space without the shelf. So on our main one, we can start with the easiest one, which is right underneath this diamond. I'll zoom out. This is where I'm starting. Right underneath our diamond, you hardly even have to turn the paper. You can very easily tell where to put a small rounded rectangle. Do it lightly because later on you might decide that you want to add storytelling elements to your dragon, such as cracks in the scales or missing scales or something growing out of them. So if you do these lines heavy, then you won't be able to add your storytelling elements later. I'm then going to, right next to it, create another bracket. Skip some space and do my left side bracket. Notice how they're the same size. Also notice that they're kind of small. I can turn my paper, skip a tad bit of space, create my right side bracket, move over, create my left side bracket. Fill up this entire letter U. Miss Rochelle, what about when I get to these awkward areas where one of these don't fit? It's okay, just don't draw the other side. Like I only have room to draw half of one here. I'll just do my left side. And then my right side one just doesn't have to exist. This is what it looks like when you have your first shelf of scales completed. When I do my second shelf of scales, I want to lay them in the center. I don't want it to be like right underneath. I want to change it up. So in the center of this one, I'll put a rounded rectangle left side. Then in the center of this one, I'll do my rounded rectangle right side. It just changes things up to make them look more like stacked bricks. Move over some. Rounded rectangle right side, skip some space. Rounded rectangle left side. It's okay if they don't perfectly all fall in the center of the ones above. I just want it your original one too, okay? These scales need to be a little bit bigger than the original ones that we just did, because this shelf of space is bigger. If you need to turn the paper so that you can more easily see how to create your left and right brackets, then do so. I have to turn the paper to see how these left and right brackets are going to work. And that's what it looks like when you have your second shelf of scales complete. Take a look at these swooshes above the eye. Focus on your first swoosh, your first swoosh only. I want for you to go into the corner of your first kind of swoosh shape. We're going to divide just this first swoosh in half, create a sketchy line in the center, following along with the swoosh shape. Inside of these shelves are smaller scales. Inside of this large one are medium-sized scales. So choose this bottom part of the swoosh, and we're going to repeat these rounded rectangles. My brackets get smaller and smaller as the swoosh gets slimmer and slimmer and disappears into nothingness. Same as on this side. The scales stay about the same size, doing my left bracket, right bracket, left and right. I'll turn my paper so I can really pay attention to the rectangles, and it's going to get smaller and smaller. Do the same above. This is what it looks like when I did the above small shelf. Now I'm going to put some medium size scales in here. Fix my lid. Rounded left side of my bracket. Rounded right side of my bracket. Notice how I turn my paper so that even I can keep up with the rectangular shape. When the shelf starts to curve, my brackets get smaller and they fit. Left side, right side. Left side, right side. Same as over here. Left side, right side. Turning my paper, left side, right side. Might just do just a left side and it just turns into a bit of a triangle here. So we have to think of these areas as very large shelves, and following along with these new large wide guidelines. I think that the easiest one to start off with is right here. I can turn my paper a little this way and do a very large left bracket. It's going at an angle. Helps me to turn my paper though. Skip a good bit of space. Curve. and make me my right bracket. We're moving into extremely large scales now. I have to pretend like the shelf, these guidelines go off the page and curve around this. So my next left bracket will be here, but you have to pretend that the scale did this, and your next right bracket is going to be about here. I'll zoom in some, but it's just the bottom. It's just the bottom, and it goes up and off the page. Your next left bracket starts out at the bottom curve and goes up and off the page. If I zoom in, all I did was right here. Pretending that the scale continued, it's probably going to end right about here. Doing my right bracket curve. Up and off the page. So when I zoom out, it's looking like this. I can then turn my paper and continue making left brackets that go off the page, skipping some space, curving. Right brackets that go off the page. Next to it, left bracket. Skip some space, getting close to our guideline again now to help us. Skip some space. Right bracket. Perfectly fits into that guideline that we created earlier. So when I turn my paper, I created large scales that are turning. They're staying inside of our racetrack. Look, racetrack turns here. That's how we know how big that scale is. Now, I feel more comfortable holding the paper upside down or having the paper upside down for these curves. I'll do a left bracket. Fits into the guideline. Kind of eyeball where the scale is, and right bracket. Continue with your large scales. They disappear off the page. We don't have our guideline anymore for a little while. Skip some space. Another scale. Now we're going back into our guideline again, which is good. Put you in a left bracket. Turn your page. Let's see, I might can make this one just fit all, be this one big scale. Like that. This area gets a little strange. You can raise your hand and we'll figure it out. I'm going to add one scale right here and kind of follow along with this shelf to finish that area off. Yours might be a little different. I'll come help. Nice. A common mistake that I see is students forget to add scale lines in this empty area, this one on the top left side, and on the right. We're pretending that these scales continue off the page. So what we're going to do is in this bottom left corner, put you in a diagonal. If you need to turn the paper this way, then do so. Right bracket that goes off the page, and then a left bracket that also goes off the page. It gives a suggested shape that even more scales are happening. That's why in previous projects I tell you to experiment with having shapes go off the page or back behind things. In this top left corner, we have to do the same thing. You can draw a diagonal right bracket. I'll zoom in for you. Diagonal right bracket, and then follow up right next to it with a left, and it gives the illusion that a scale is over here and another full one is over there. Then I'll leave that there for you to see a little bit longer. Then right here, do a little right bracket that goes off the page, and then a little left bracket that follows it. I'll zoom in. That's all that I did in this corner. Now's the time to create some storytelling elements or to personalize some things. What if you don't want every single scale to be a rounded rectangle? What if you want to erase out some of the brackets and change the shape up? For example, I could do like a bit of a yin and a yang kind of shape. Where I do one, I have to double it up. I'll double it up with another line right here. So it just kind of breaks up some of the shapes of the scales. I can do another one right here. I can make one go out and back in, and I'll zoom in. And then I'll just have this other side of this other scale follow it. That's more advanced. You don't have to do that. You also can add spikes or change the overall shape of the end of this eyelid. Like if you wanted to have the eyelid more of a dramatic curve, you could change the shape of it and feed your scales into it differently. Some students then add some spikes. Remember, if you add spikes, whatever old scales used to exist behind the spike, you have to erase out. So this line right here, if there's a spike going over it, then you have to erase out the old information so that the spike gets pulled forward in space.